Jump in and get that.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 15 of 25 with Tech 25. Tim Higgins, Secretary, District 25, joined by
Andrew Benton. I'm Data and Systems Specialist for the district. Hello.
Chris Fano, Director of Technology. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. And today we will be talking about thinking techie, which is really just a pretty vague and made up kind of a term, but based on stuff that we hear all the time, which is people telling us, you know, I'm not very techie. I'm not very tech literate. We hear that one all the time. And I really tend to believe that it has very little, like, we don't have some special powers over here. We just happen to have a way of, like, an interest in technology and then a way of going about problem solving tech. You know, we don't really have every answer just on the top of our head, but we may know where to go for it and how to go about figuring it out. So we kind of want to try to instill some of those strategies into you. And so that's what we're here to do today. So if you just give me 1 second, I'm going to jump into a Google presentation with just a couple little, pointers, I guess, or it's a sort of a system to go about thinking about this stuff. And then we'll jump into some examples and how we can think about it in the real world here. And so I'm going to jump into Safari. I open up a window, and, you know, I did set this up, but this is a good example. This actually happened to me as I was trying to set this up. I'm missing all sorts of little bars that I'm normally used to seeing. I have a bookmark for Google Drive right here that normally shows up here, but I can't figure out where it is. So instead of, you know, breaking down, giving up, closing it down, trying to open something else, I try to, I guess, kind of figure out, you know, what may be different this time around, or what I can see on the screen that might help me figure out where I need to go. And so it's a different look to the screen. There's an option called View up here. And of course, then under View, we can show all sorts of little favorite bars and, you know, different things that we maybe are used to seeing here when we open up Google. So I was looking originally for this little Google shortcut, and I'm going to head into Drive to open up my Google Slides presentation. Thinking techie. And so I'm going to just run us through sort of, I guess, more than anything is just my little theory on how I break down problems. I don't think, like anything, there's ever one exact proper way to do it. But this is just, I don't know, kind of what I came up with today. So thinking techie. And as with anything, frustration is going to be the first step. And I think that this is typically a deterrent. When anybody ever feels frustrated, it's typically sort of something that you then either give up or try something, like go and do something else instead of it and drop the problem at hand. Really, frustration is the proper first step of any problem. It's really how learning starts. You know, it's not a fun process when you don't understand something. And frustration is sort of that feeling that goes along with it. So at this point, when you run into an obstacle, it's a good thing to just sort of take a breath so that you can dig in. Take kind of a step back for a second, because I think, too, if you try jumping into something just all angry, you know, filled with emotion, things just aren't going to go particularly well. So frustration, proper first step. If you're not frustrated, you're not really learning anything, most likely. Which brings us to our second step, which is finding the question. And this is more important because, you know, pretty often, for us at least, we get these sort of questions of, my computer doesn't work, the internet is broken, these really general questions, which, you know, never conducive to figuring out the problem. And it definitely doesn't help you understand what the problem is to learn it for next time if you're not thinking in more specifics. And it definitely doesn't help the people who are trying to help you when we're trying to figure out, I guess, how to recreate the problem.
Well, and just to talk a little bit more about that, because it's really important as you go to your next point. Even if you're doing searches for how to fix it, we're looking in general terms, you're going to get equally as frustrated. So as you move into that next issue, whether it's a person or a search engine, you need to narrow it down a little bit with some details.
Absolutely, and finding out just specific, sort of explaining what you're seeing, just being more descriptive really is all that you need to be. So down here at the bottom, I'm just kind of talking about narrowing your issues, which those two questions could be better posed as: why will my computer not move past this gray screen with the Apple logo? Or, you know, why can't I use this new co-writer extension in Chrome? Much more specific than, you know, the up top general questions. Which then we jump into using your resources. Resources all around us, all different types. And so this is where we want to sort of take that question that we learned, or that we figured out, and then learn as much about it as we can. This is where we're starting to like build a theory as to what's wrong. And so you can, you know, type into a Google search for, you know, what does this gray screen with an Apple logo mean? So kind of to Chris's point, that if you just put in, why does my computer not work? There's thousands of reasons that your computer cannot work, but there's many fewer reasons as to why the gray screen with the Apple logo shows up. And so sort of this next page, sort of my 3 bullet points, I guess, is your own mind, so your own knowledge, your past experience, which will build over time when you run into problems and when you truly solve them, instead of, you know, maybe reverting back to something you used to do that's not as efficient and that's not as great. If you actually take the time to go through this learning process, you're going to build this resource over time. Always, you know, it's sort of the tech workplace sort of joke that's pretty serious, which is that we just use Google to figure out a lot of things. It's, you know, because it's this knowledge from, you know, our third point is knowledgeable people, which would be more, I guess, the people around you. Google is the knowledge of all people who have access to the internet. And, you know, it's this really rich source. And again, to the point of why a specific question is great is because it can lead you to find these different forums, these different menus, tutorials, and things to sort of come up with a theory or, you know, a solution to what your question is. After that, we move on to trying something, moving into action, doing something different than you did the first time, and, you know, doing it differently. I think there's some saying about what it like with crazy, like something about with insanity has to do with doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. This is our step where we're going to try something different to hopefully get a different result, which is a much more reasonable expectation. And so hopefully after you do something new, hopefully you find success. More often than not, after the first go-ahead, is you're going to head back to that frustration. It may not have worked, which is totally okay. That's how it goes. There's, again, not just one answer to things. These are complex pieces of hardware. They're complex pieces of software. It's not always going to work the first time. And so the real secret to this whole thing, everybody always looks for secrets in this self-help type stuff, is the persistence of it, to then move back all the way back to the frustration step and moving through it one more time, and hopefully getting closer. And again, throughout this frustration, questioning, resources, trying something new, you will be building up sort of new knowledge, new experience, which will better equip you to solve problems the next time. So that's sort of, I guess, my simple little 4-stepper. What we're kind of going to go and talk about is different situations we found ourselves in that have popped up, and kind of walking through these steps, breaking it down so that hopefully it makes a little bit more sense as to how we go about different things. And maybe you'll learn something. Maybe these issues are things that you've run into before.
And as Andrew's getting set up, I just want to say, too, I know both of you guys, and I think everybody who helps, what the other thing with persistence that comes up is this idea of confidence and feeling comfortable about being able to go and do something, and then you're not going to break a machine and something's not going to light on fire, but that you can repeat this cycle, okay, that Tim talked about here, very quickly, that you can try one thing, go back and look for another, try one thing and look for another, explore with that confidence and be persistent, and I think you'll be very successful moving on. So I just want to talk a couple things. Can you throw the screen back up there?
Yeah.
Or maybe. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about, really, I'm going to go back to something that Tim started just at the beginning, and this idea of inspiring some curiosity and getting comfortable and familiar with technology. So people ask us a lot about, where do you guys go? Where do you find information? How do you stay current on certain things? And one of the places that I like to go to is this place called OS 10 Daily. So this is just a website real quick that has all of these tips and tricks, and it's not just for your computer, but if you have an iPhone or an iPad, especially in the classroom. And there are these very quick tips that they just list one after the other. They put them out every day. You could search for them. And what it does is it starts to give you some of the language and terminology and ideas of what's being released, or, for example, here, an actual suggestion on how to repair or fix a problem that you may have. And so a site like this is a very quick read, but it also gives you a lot of links and resources and ideas. And I'm going to talk about this right here in just a minute, that you could take and directly apply. Now, in this case, you're not searching for something necessarily specific, even though you could. But again, this is one that I think just opens my mind to what's possible and what some of the things are that we may have an issue with. So to that end, quickly, I want to show you. So here we have a typical issue, especially in our environment where we're sharing computers and we're sharing logins. Kids come out, they don't log in, or you walk into an environment where you need to get in. So in this case, let's say I want to go and I want to add an account because I don't want to log in with Tim's stuff, but I need to look for mine. And I'm trying to log in with myself, and I go to add account. And in some cases, this window doesn't come up, but it just repeats this window over and over again, even though I'm trying to add an account. And so, for example, in this case, I could do a couple things. I could try to go to another browser and see if I could replicate the issue. I could quit out altogether and restart the computer, and that would probably solve the problem. Or I could also look at what is another thing that may be holding up the issue. So when you learn about these, you know that each web browser holds a history, okay, and a cache or a browsing history about where you've been, what you've logged in with, and even the pages that have been loaded. So if you ever come across a page that you think should be updated, but it hasn't updated yet, or you get into this loop where you think you should be adding a new account, but it's taking you back to the same page. One thing that you can do in each browser is they have an option to clear the website data or some of the cache that's been stored up. So in this case, in Safari, it's under the main menu. And you can remove the history of the cookies and other website data based on a certain time frame. When you do that, it will refresh, and you can try to load your page again and see if that works. Then you can go from here and then move on to things like restarting the computer or trying a different browser. So again, just in Tim's model, this is one step to try first. If it doesn't work, you can go on to the next one and continue to escalate it until you needed additional help if it still happens.
And something I didn't really diagram here, but is typically like a pretty solid like tech troubleshooting thing, is this idea of going from least invasive to most invasive in terms of the things that you try. And so try the simplest. And we're back.
So that's a perfect example of thinking and working techie. Don't quit out of a program that you need to run your broadcast. So with that in mind, Tim was talking a little bit about this idea of working your way through different levels of a problem. So Tim, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to necessarily finish about that.
I think just the least invasive to most invasive, you just want to do the simplest things that change the least amount of settings or delete the least amount of data, things like that, before you move on to some, bigger, harder things.
So for example, quitting out of a browser would not be the first step if you were trying to still maintain an active
Totally. But we just learned that. We added some experience to our resources in our own mind from that experience, and I think we're going to, be better for it going forward.
And we're back. So there's one more thing that I can show quickly, as long as I keep us on point here. And that is, so this was great. This was an example today that happened. We had someone come in and talk about a picture. So when we're doing websites and blogs, when we're sending photos to people, or we're just trying to deal with images, all these cameras now that we have take very, very large, high resolution types of pictures. And so they came in and said, here's this picture I have that's very large. And they wanted to say, how can I scale it down so that I can put it in my blog post, or I can put it on my website without it being so big, especially if your program doesn't allow you to scale it in the program. So here, when you click it on this computer, it opens in preview, which in most of them it will. And what a lot of people don't know is that you can use the tools, okay, in this case, to say, okay, I want to adjust the size of the actual picture itself. You can also do some basic editing, like rotating it or flipping it, or you can even crop it if you wanted to. But in this case, they just said, I don't know how to adjust the size. They didn't want to bring it into a photo editor. They just wanted to make it smaller. So in preview, you can go to adjust size. Here you can see that this photo right now is at 45 by 34 inches, which obviously is very large, way unnecessary for a blog post. You can go in and just change it to a 4 by 3 picture. You click OK. This is zoomed out, but it's now that 4 by 3 that you may want, and then you can go ahead and save that or export it out as a different format. Use that one for your blog post, and that problem is solved. So I think in those cases, sometimes we just don't know what's available in the programs that even open up the files that we have. But by a little playing around, again, either by clicking in the menu or doing a quick search about how to resize a photo in OS X would get you to the same answer. So again, that was a real life example from today. We're able to get that up in the blog, no problem at all.
And just another sort of little resource I'd like to point out too, since we're here, is this help menu here is a pretty nice resource in terms of if you're ever looking for, that you need to resize it. And so here we see that there's an adjust size option that shows up from this help menu. And the nice thing is in the newer operating systems, it actually pulls down the menu and shows you where in your set of menus that option is. So that help menu is one of those nice resources. If you just happen to run into a problem quick inside of a program, it's right there to help you out.
I don't have anything to show. So I was going to give you an example from my own world, but it also has to do this piece about asking the question right over my head there that Tim spoke about in his presentation. I think it's so critical. What I like to think about is what is the process. So if my example is that I'm getting a call that a new student isn't showing in one of our classroom tools or something like that, it's stepping back for a second, taking a breath, and thinking about where the path of that student's data is supposed to go. And so what is the path, and what's the process, and how do we get the data there in the first place so we can step back a little bit and find out what might be going on. I know that it comes from our student information system. New students, you want to go into, I go into the student information system to make sure that he's there. And so if he makes sure he's not pre-registered or not active or something like that, if I do see that he's there, I might think about the file that's sent to that system overnight and maybe go look at that file, open that file, and see if the student is in there. In my example, the student was in there. So what's happening? So now I'm still continuing to go through the process. I'm asking all these questions And I get to the point where I now realize that maybe while that file is downloaded every night and it does have that student in it, it's not making its last little jump into that classroom tool. So I go into the file, you don't have to know about this part, I'm not really training you how to do it, just the idea. And I go to where the automation happens to upload that file into that tool, and I realize that it hasn't happened for a couple days, and that something is broken there. So I don't know, just really that idea. Sort of separately, the way I like to think about it is, if let's say your wireless goes out at home and you know that you're going to have to make that dreaded call to the company, what are those 3-4 things they're going to ask you to do that you're going to be all frustrated because one, you wish you would have thought of it, two, it's taking forever to go through those steps, and I don't know, I just think if you're going to call a support line, have it all, take care of all of those initial troubleshooting steps and try to get to that singular question. Be able to say to that support person, listen, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and now all of a sudden you guys are in the advanced level of the support project. And so even in calling us, you know, just that idea, that's not exactly why I'm saying it, but yeah, just what is the process? Another example that I had, Chris kind of had the same idea, you know, map, they're in map, and it seems to have died on them, NWA map testing, and the site seems to have died. Rather than just figuring that all of the internet is down and, you know, sending kids back or whatever, you'll go using the machine and just go to another site, go to CNN.com or whatever it might be, just to get those initial steps out, that maybe it's map that's down out in Oregon and not actually that your internet is out. There's obviously the checking the wireless in the upper right. There's trying a different browser. There's things like that. But yeah, just the process and getting to that ask a question is really the part I wanted to reinforce.
So, you know, again, this is a different week that we're, you know, a different type of strategy, I guess, for our shows. It's less about here's a specific thing, here's specifically how you do it, because, you know, and I know me and Andrew talk about this all the time. Any, you know, college kids going through sort of information technology, like technology-based majors and things like that, they don't learn about the technology itself because it's changing so fast. I know it's everybody's giant frustration, is that things just turn over so quickly that having sort of these basic sort of a mindset about it is what is going to be a lot more valuable to you than to know specifically how you change, you know, your settings within inside of Chrome or something along those lines. You know, and again, and the other point of this too is, you know, I worried about doing this as a topic because I don't want it to sound like people shouldn't be calling us for questions either. That's not, we're not trying to sort of put everybody off to you know, you're on your own sort of Wild West style of tech support. But I do think in the world that we live in, it's powerful, or it's important to all of you be empowered to be able to be excited about technology, to be interested in it, and to be able to get yourself out of you know, in frustrating, irritating situations when things aren't working right.
Well, and I think just to that end, I don't think it's about pushing anybody off, but it is about empowering people to say, you can do it. You can. The answers are out there. It's amazing what it is, but it may take some attempts to do it, and you have to have that confidence to do it. And I can just end if we're at that point of a recent story where, again, very realistic to the district. Teacher calls up, says, my grade book isn't right. None of the entries look correct. We had to go back and forth a few times, and I finally said, can you just send me a screenshot of what it looks like? And she did that, and as soon as she did, I could see, obviously, there was something wrong with the margins or the display, but I'd never seen that issue before. So I had to go through the same steps. I had to clarify first with the teacher about exactly what the problem was. I was able to log in and replicate the problem so I could see the exact same thing that she saw. When I did that, I noticed there was a difference. Mine looked one way, hers looked another way. And so that led me to my Google search. And one little tip I would always say is include the name of the program that you're using. So I said Easy Grade Pro Web, display issues. And I went through a couple help articles. Nothing was great. No offense to their help site, even though it didn't direct me. So eventually it did just escalate to a call to their support. And he walked me through where the actual display settings were for the grade book. And it just so happened that the font was an italic bold font, and it kind of messed up the orientation of the whole grade book. So a very bizarre, random problem, but just that escalates out, and that communication is important, and the multiple steps go along the way, and we were able to solve it relatively quickly, and
Success.
That's
Got out
what
of the
it's all
cycle.
about.
Right. It is, and two, you know, it's and I think both of you probably learned something about the whole process. You know, what we want to try to do, and again, it's why, you know, why we're here is, you know, I think I had it in my slide but never mentioned it, but it's that whole idea of, you know, you give a man a fish and he eats for a day or whatever, and you teach him how to fish and he can feed himself forever. That's kind of what we're hoping to do here a little bit. And so, again, as always, any questions you can send on to tech25@sd25.org or tweet at us at HSD25Tech.
Just a really quick plug for, it was a couple episodes ago, sorry I don't know the actual one, but we did a whole thing, one of these on all of the resources that we actually use. And so that step of use your resources, please look back at that episode. I think it was one of our best.
It was a top quality episode.
It wasn't bad. It was 5 stars for sure. But yeah, we talked about the resources we use every day to get our answers. So anyway.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in,
Thanks.
and start thinking techie. Have a good one.
Happy fishing.